participants are still joining in. We are still waiting for the rest of the panelists to join in, which I'm sure will be happening soon as we go on. So far, I see we have about 13 of us, 13 or so, who are going to be with us today as we get into the topic about free markets in Africa. So today we are expecting to have three panelists. So I think I'm going to ask the panelists to turn on their videos, if possible, that is, so that we may be able to see them. Mlani Majozi from South Africa, I see he's already joined us. Who else is here? Peter Bismarck, not yet with us. Linda is also will also be joining us soon. So welcome so much to this session today. We are grateful for you finding time to be with us as we try to look at the African economy and free markets as we try to understand what really free markets mean, as we try to get the history of free markets in Africa, and also try to look at the future. Where should we be? How are we going to get that? How are we going to achieve that state of having at least some open free markets in Africa? Today we are going to be joined by three guests. I want to take this moment to introduce them. Of course, I'm going to begin with from Mlani Majozi from South Africa. If you can hear me, sir, please say something so we can know that you can hear us and you are able to, we are able to hear you. Majozi.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you so much. Welcome, sir. We're going also to be having Linda. Linda Kavuka.
I'm trying to unlock the video and it says you can't start your video because the host has stopped it.
All right. Thank you. Evans will take care of that. Evans, the video for Majozi needs some work from you. Thank you. Linda, is Linda with us yet? Linda, if you can talk, we see whether your mic is working. Not yet. Peter Bismarck. All right, thank you. So as we wait for the rest to join, I'm going to begin this session with Majozi. Even though he tried to get his video connected for this session. So Mlani is a business and a macroeconomist, analyst, writer, and a commentator on economic and political issues. His writings have been published in the City Press, Biz News, African Liberty, and Politics Web. He is also a contributor on News 24, South Africa's leading news website. He is also an economics contributor on South Africa's Chai FM. I hope that I got the pronunciation for that, the radio station correctly. So welcome so much, sir.
Yeah, thanks. They pronounce it Chai FM, not Chai FM. It's Chai. Apparently, Chai.
All right. So yeah,
which means apparently Chai means live FM, something like that. Yeah. So yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I said chai because right around here chai means tea in Swahili.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So welcome so much. I believe that the rest of the um, panelists are yet to join us, but I think it's okay if we begin getting into the discussion with you. And today I'd like us to begin from the beginning, from the definition of free markets. We try to understand what free markets, because that will form a basis of ourselves and maybe even the audience trying to understand that whether free market is something that's applicable in Africa, whether it's here or and so on and so on. So, in your own understanding, how do we define the whole concept of free markets?
Well, to me, a free market means people are able to trade um, any products they want or any services they want with each other within the frameworks or laws that have been set up, usually by government, right? So, and there has to be property rights involved, in the sense that whether you own a house, whether you own a phone, whether you own could be a car, cash that you have, whatever it might be, that is your asset. That's your property. And that property, it must be guaranteed that it is protected, right? It has to be protected, and the laws and frameworks must make sure that they protect that, your property. And also the exchange that I'm talking about, the trade in between people, as I mentioned, products and services. In some instances, there are contracts that we get into, right, when it comes to that kind of trade. And those contracts, they need to be enforced. And usually the people who enforce those contracts to make sure that if you and I get into a deal, that we sign up, we agree that on XY date, you must deliver the goods for me on this, we agree on the amount, we agree on the delivery date, we get into a contract. If somehow you don't meet or you don't keep up to that contract or you don't abide by it, there must be some rules and frameworks and the laws that make sure that you are held accountable if you cannot agree on them, deliver on what you and I agreed upon. So that's why the laws and frameworks are quite important when people are trading in a free market. It's free in the sense that you and I can get into any deal, whatever you and I agree upon, without any interference. But then there has to be some basic rules that are lawful, or the frameworks that make sure that whatever you and I can get into, it's something that we agreed upon, and that we can keep up with our agreement. So that's basically the definition of a free market, to me, and how I see it. Some people tend to say that, some people may go as far as saying there's no government, there's no role for government. Well, for me, the role of government means just making sure that those rules are in place, and that those rules, they ensure that whoever is trading have a choice, and that they are able to participate freely without any kind of blockade of some sort as to the decisions they make. So that's basically, in a nutshell, what the free market is and what ought to be. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I like the fact that you because my next question was to be on the involvement of the government in what we are essentially calling a free market. And I like the way that you've said, in as much as we are trying to have this concept of a free market, at the end of the day, there has to be some degree of the government being involved in terms of enforcing contracts, and so on, and make sure that nobody gets a raw deal out of these interactions that we are having in the market. But my next question, and of course, Evans is going to be sharing a poll right now on that tries to capture the history of free markets in Africa. And this is now where I want to ask you. Yeah, I can see the poll. The poll is on our should be on your Zoom. How do you think we are doing in Africa in terms of free market?
Well, it's that's a very interesting question, because there has been some work that's been done on this. In fact, work is being done on a regular and sort of annual basis. There is the Fraser Institute. I think it's based in North America. They do the Economic Freedom Index once a year, and I think the Heritage Foundation as well. They do their economic index of economic freedom, where they basically measure as to what extent do each sort of country around the world or region is capitalist, right? In other words, leans towards free markets. So
Free markets,
and you tend to find and one of the very saddening things when you look at that ranking, that index, is that Africa, most African countries, we are ranked at the bottom, right? We are way at the bottom in terms of the rankings. And that basically is evidence that we are not doing something right, that the ideas of free markets haven't yet gained ground, that we are not implementing them, that we are not a pro-market continent, that there is so much that needs to be done from a sort of a free market implementation point of view. So evidence is there. When people say there isn't evidence, evidence is there that Africa is sort of behind, our continent is behind when it comes to these values of free markets and open trade and so on. And here's the thing that's very interesting though. When you look at that ranking and you look at the countries that are at the top, right? Hong Kong, Singapore is one of them, New Zealand, I think, Switzerland and all these, you find that these are countries who are very rich, who are very much well off. These countries that are way at the top of that index. In other words, they lean more to the free market values. They embrace the free market values. They embrace more government, low taxes, deregulation, and so on. And they are way at the top there. And us, the people in Africa who are we are way behind, we are not leaning towards these pro-market reforms, we are doing terribly in terms of our economies, right? So we are left behind in many measures. So I'm trying to say here that evidence is there that Africa, we are left behind, but also we as pro-market people, that evidence gives us sort of ammunition in the sense that we can argue our case that the reason why we are not as wealthy as we should be is because we are not pursuing pro-market reforms. So we are not sort of creating an environment where business is a driver. Government cuts spending and government doesn't nationalize things. There are no controls of any sort. So we are not doing those things. And because we are not doing those things, we are not growing fast enough and we are not able to consume a very young labor force that the continent has. So there's a great deal of work that needs to be done in that front.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. And I'm looking at the sort of relationship maybe most African countries have maybe with the West and so on. And I know we have an history of colonialism in Africa, and most times even I know free markets, capitalism, when you mention those concepts to most African people, they will tell you, what you're trying to introduce is a foreign concept. You know, all African countries really suffered because of colonialism, and I understand the fear that most of these African people might have in terms of accepting free markets ideas and capitalism, and so, and most of them even will tend to argue for socialism, communism, and so on. And looking at the poll that we have on our screen right now, the question is the free market a foreign concept? And I can say that there are some guys who are saying yes, a good number say no, but there are also others who are not sure, saying maybe. So do you think that free market is a foreign concept to Africa?
Well, George Aiti has done a great work in this. I don't know if you guys know him. He has done great work in sort of putting us into an understanding as to, is free markets a foreign concept in Africa? And his work basically suggests that no, actually, this is the idea of trade, the idea of property rights. It's always been, with us as people of Africa. It's not really a foreign concept. You see, it's interesting and it's very helpful that you brought the idea of Europeans, coming into Africa and colonizing many countries and all that happened when they came here. Along the way, what happened was that because of colonialism and the white minority rule and the law that happened, there was somehow this perception that, colonialism is capitalism. In South Africa, where I live and where I am from, the idea of capitalism, free markets, free enterprise system, whatever term you use, it's always associated with Europeans and white people, right?
Yeah, that's
so
true. That's true.
And it's a misconception, and partly it's a misconception because one of the things that happened during the minority rule, the white rule in South Africa, was that there was always this projection that the white minority rule, in fact, proclaimed itself as a free market government, right? Whereas when you look at their practices, such as statism, controls, you can't trade this, you cannot do that, segregating people and all that stuff, they were not capitalist at all. But they projected themselves as pro-market and free market people, and people who believe in capitalism and so on. And over the years, over that time, people tend to buy the narrative, and it became sort of instilled in people's minds that capitalism equals to the apartheid government, which is white people who are repressing Black people, right? Right? And then on the other side, in our case, in South Africa, all the Black movements that were hard at work in terms of, pushing back against apartheid, fighting for a democratic society, they tended to believe in sort of Marxist ideas, right? Nationalizations, government setting rules, owning lands and so on, and many other things, that define Marxism. So what happened was that, and then people tend to associate, Marxism sounds quite good in theory, but not in practice, as evidence shows. So people tend to, from that, people thought, well, if you are more a socialist person, therefore, then you are pro-Black, right? If you are a capitalist and you believe in free markets, then you are, that's for white people. Socialism for Blacks, and a free market system is for white people. So then it became a racial thing like that. So as a result, along the way, capitalism or the free market system has been over the years of our history, very much associated with white people who originally are from Europe. As a result, it's perceived to be a kind of a European thing or foreign, when in fact it
foreign
wasn't. It's
concept,
just a history. Our history diluted, sort of messed up the whole concept of this economic arrangement that we are talking about. Because there was so much propaganda along the way, there was so much misinformation, not only by governments and so on, before the end of the Cold War, before 1994. As a result, now there is this conception that the free market system is something that is foreign, it's not African, of which when you look at the history and the hard facts, you find that actually no, this is what we're doing for some while, for a long while.
True.
And somewhere along the way, our history was messed up and tainted in some form, and the wrong information got spread, and the wrong knowledge, got spread, and people know the wrong stuff. So that's a sad kind of historical situation that we've had to, or we are dealing with.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for that. I hope Linda Kavuka, I hope that now you can be able to join us.
Yes, I had been on the call all throughout. It seemed like I had been muted.
Sorry, I think we also have Linda Weston here. I didn't know who was who, but anyway, thank you so much for joining us. So yeah, guys, we are also joined by Linda Kavuka as we discuss these topics. I want to introduce her just a bit briefly. She has a bachelor's degree in law from the University of Nairobi, postgraduate diploma in law from the Kenya School of Law, and master's in international trade. And she's also been my boss for more than 3 years and so on. So it's good to see you, Linda. And I want to bring you, on the discussion about the history of free markets in Africa. Is it a foreign ideology?
Well, just like my colleague Pumlani had mentioned, I borrow heavily from the works of George Aite regards this specific topic. And I think I've presented about this specific issue in some conferences and also in articles, that free markets isn't as a foreign concept as is believed. And we've just seen from the poll today, there are many people who don't know whether it's a foreign concept or ours, and others believe it's foreign. So I'd like to give an example of African traditional setting and how we can see free market playing. So Africans in the past used to exchange through barter trade, isn't it correct? So our communities were spread across the continent in different places. Sometimes it was across now countries that are two different countries. For example, there are communities that are across the borders of Kenya and Tanzania, or across the borders of Kenya and Somalia and Uganda. And African people, different communities used to trade with each other long distance. They would walk. Now, say a community, a Bantu community, Bantu people used to be hunters and gatherers, farmers mostly. So probably they would have grains and skins. And then another community that lived along the coastline would be trading with the Arabs and the Asians, and they would have silk or beads. So these two communities would trade with each other, exchanging the grain and the skins for the silk and the beads. And then you find, if you see the Maasai community of today, or some of our communities in Kenya now, we have beaded jewelry, and that those beads are being imported, and that's how they got them. Or some communities from the western part of Kenya, for example, or even the Eastern African region, the western part mostly, they had beaded jewelry, also from the central part of Kenya, yet they're not found across the coastline, which means they traded with communities that were located along the coastline for barter, for probably for something else. So when these communities were traveling to trade with each other, they ended up creating trade routes. So these trade routes have come up out of spontaneous order. And the trading routes that started from individual communities trading with each other later grew to become the roads that we have today. You know, like the highways or the main roads. The roads that we know now were probably created by spontaneous order by people passing through them either to graze their cattle or mostly to trade. Now, as these two communities, when they were trading, they used to meet in some place. Let's just think about like a T-junction. So where the T-junctions were, where they used to trade, and they started creating like markets. And these markets developed and developed until they became the modern day cities that we know today. Like Nairobi, for example, or Entebbe in Uganda, Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. If we think about how these cities came up, were these cities designed by the rulers of that time? Was it a creation of the king or the council of elders that this specific place will be the city of Nairobi or Dar es Salaam? They came up out of spontaneous order. And so we tend to see free markets into play. And also the products that these communities were trading or bartering, were they decided by their kings or their rulers, or were these commodities things that the family that was trading or the individual was deciding on their own that I want to farm and I will be exchanging farming grain for something else? These were things that they determined on their own. They were not predetermined by the state or their rulers, the king or the council of elders of that time. And also back to the commodities that these communities were trading. Now, I want to bring in some concepts. Some people may disagree, but in the African community, we are taught that the single unit is a family. So you look at a family of the African community similarly to how you consider an individual of our modern community. So it doesn't mean that because we look at family as the smallest unit that we are communistic. No, it's just that the family was related to what we now know as an individual, and this is how. When it came to transfer of land, property, like you can only inherit land if you belong to a family. If you're in their bloodline, if you're their son, if you're a woman, you're going to be married off to another family. If you're a daughter of the home, and if you're an in-law, you're going to be married into the family. Like you don't have the land right, but like it will be inherited by your children so long as they carry the blood of the family line. So you can't inherit this. A king can't come and say, this land will be moved to this person. The land right is pegged on the family, and they decide who it goes to in their bloodline.
Right.
So if you have a son, you get the land. You don't, like, unfortunately, so it goes that way. And so this family also decided what they will do with their land, whether they're going to farm or whether they're going to graze, whether who in the family will get how much of the land. So it was something that is being decided by this family. And that's why we're looking at the family in the African community similarly to an individual of a modern day community. So these two are just a few of the examples that can give you a practical example of African societies were not inherently communistic as is assumed. They were actually free communities that were practicing free markets. And the last thing is, even if you look at the governance, where some communities had kingdoms, some communities were ruled by council of elders, but these communities had something in common. Whoever was in charge of ruling could not give a decision on an independent decision on an issue. Whenever there was an issue or that there was a council of elders that had to negotiate and give their opinion and give a ruling, and then the king or maybe the chief of the council will announce what has been decided by all of them. We'll think about what has been said and give a decision. No one at one point was allowed to listen to a case and give a ruling at that point. Like, leadership wasn't centralized, or power or governance, it belongs to the whole community. And even the individuals, the families, they had rights. And whenever there were issues that were happening, people were given, they had representatives who would speak for them. So yeah, I use these examples to share my argument that African communities were actually not communistic, and that free markets was not a foreign concept. It is part of our communities.
Okay, thank you so much, Linda. So, guys, we are talking to Linda Kavuka and Mlani Majozi on matters free markets in Africa. And yeah, for the last 23 minutes or so, we've been talking on the history of free markets, what it is. But now I'd like us to move into the promise of free markets promise in Africa. But before we do that, briefly, because there has been a lot of mentioning of socialism and communism from you too. So I like maybe Linda, you tell us what communism it's all about in a minute or so, and then Majozi will talk to us about socialism, and then we'll move forward to the promise of free markets in Africa. Linda?
So, in simple terms, communism, the word community comes from communism or vice versa. In the communist ideology, property and rights belong to everyone equally, whether they're unequal or not. So, an individual, the individual as you know today and your rights do not exist in that form. Everything that you do must be in consideration to every other person in equal measure, no matter the impact or the effort you're putting into. So in a communist society, no person, you cannot own land, you cannot own property in your own. Like there are no individual rights. Everything belongs to the community at the same time, in the same way, in the same quantity. Let me put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, Majozi, on socialism.
Oh, so socialism, it's, some things are different. Some definitions evolved over time. They evolve over time.
Sure.
What was called socialism 20 years ago may be something different now. People tend to interpret terms differently for some reason. I'm not sure why that is. For example, to give you a quick one, a liberal in America is a different person from a liberal, how we see a liberal here and in some other countries. So the way things are defined, these terms, they can change over time, right? So that's very much possible. But my understanding of what socialism is, and as explained in the Oxford Dictionary, they talk about the owns of the means of production by the state, right? By government. That's what the original or the real meaning of socialism is, right? The state or government owns the means of production. It could be land, it could be the buildings, it could be the machines to manufacture, whatever that may be. So that's what socialism is. That's what sort of the definition in the Oxford Dictionary. That's what it means. And then under that, people who pursue socialism, in other words, they want the state to own, to take control of the means of production. They also, they have a list of other things that they would like to see. For example, fixing prices, right? Whether it's in the labor market in terms of wages, whether it's putting price caps on some of the goods and services that are being sold. In labor, minimum wages are quite an example of what setting prices is in the labor market. They also would want to see things like free education. In other words, government footing the bill, paying for people's education. They would like to see free healthcare. So under those people, the state or government has to do all those things, right? And the money doesn't drop from the sky. Taxpayers have to fund that. So in other words, the taxpayers are funding that. And by the way, they don't fund it by choice or willingness. They fund it by force, because if you don't pay those taxes, then you're in serious trouble, right? So that is what socialism is. Now, when it comes to socialism in the United States, Bernie Sanders calls himself a democratic socialist, right? Those who are associated with socialism these days, they tend to sort of give a bit of a different meaning, to it. Well, in fact, they mean the same things, the same policies that have been pursued over the past 100 years or so, with a great deal of failure, right? But they rebrand it. Some people will come out and call themselves the advocate of social justice. We want social justice. Okay, what do you mean by social justice? You find that no, what they mean is actually government taking control of property, taking control of land, setting up prices, doing X, Y, Z, whatever it may be that government is dishing out using taxpayers' money, right? So I'm trying to say that this practice is coming up in different kind of definitions and forms, and people tend to give different labels when in fact they mean the same thing of state control.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. I want to remind our audience that you can still send questions or comments that you may have. Yeah, for those of you who are using a PC, we have the question and answer section. You can also share in the chat box. I'll be able to see all that, and then we'll be able to float some of these questions to our panelists. So I'm being told that Peter Bismarck is also ready to join us. Yeah, so Peter studied at the Presbyterian College of Education and graduated from university with a Bachelor of Education. He was among the 25 selected young Africans for the Young African Scholars Colloquium in Kenya. He also served as an academic aide for a number of schools in Ghana. He also holds a certificate in think tank and fundraising from an Atlas Network, and graduated from the Atlas Leadership Academy. He is a former director in the Bismarck College and Marketing, and the marketing manager of the Builders of Today Associate. So yeah, Peter, if you can hear me, I hope you can. Please, you can turn on your video.
Yeah, right. I can hear you. Thanks for the introduction.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Now, I want to, as we move into the second section of this discussion, I want to read a comment that I've seen from Mugambi. I hope that I'll be able to see it. It's running away from me. Mugambi, yeah, it's on free markets, and he's saying, I think free markets gives people an opportunity or a chance to succeed in life without asking permission, but through voluntary cooperation with others. Peter Bismarck, if you're ready, is that statement true?
Right. Thanks for having me. Very sorry, I'm late. Actually, I'm traveling across the country to collect some few data, so I am out of the capital, and stability is always on a higher level. So forgive me.
Okay, welcome, sir.
Yes, it's more than true. The market is what determines everything. It determines the competition. The market determines choices. It gives value for whatever you want to do, and then it also gives you more options to test for yourself. So for me, anything about the market, it's what I'll be going for. I'll give a very good example here. I think in 2017 in Ghana, there was this policy on towing levy that one company is supposed to tow all cars in the country when they get broken down. So every vehicle owner has to subscribe to that company policy. and it was being administered by the government. So we spoke at length about it that it's not giving choices. So there'll be no efficient situations where cars are broken down. There's only one company, and the company may choose to come or not, and then refunds may not become because you are going to pay this through your insurances as well as your fuel and other spare parts you'll be buying from the market. So we said this monopoly. Why don't we open the market for lots of people to come in and then ensure competition efficiency? So if company A is not performing or not responding to my cars being down, I have to just switch quickly, get the next one. So that kind of policy was then suspended by the government. Kind of advocacies we did, including money, suspended the entire policy. So, the market is what you look at when it comes to demand and supply, when it comes to prices, efficiency, all these things. So I really do agree with whoever wrote that statement. Another thing is that I don't know about South Africa and then Nigeria. I've observed that we have huge power problems, energy problems. Including Ghana, we also had one in the past 4 years. So we were looking at a situation where we had few power producers and then only one power distributor. I can't tell you the same thing is happening in South Africa and Nigeria. But if you have maybe one power producer who might be producing power for the whole nation and then one distributor for the whole nation, obviously there'll be no choices. There'll be no choice to switch from one company to the other for efficiency. So we had lots of these companies at the production end and at the distribution ends. Obviously, you will have this kind of choices. So if company A or power producer is not performing, I just need the next one who will give me power or stable power each day and then give me value for money. So most of Africa's problem when it comes to energy is the monopoly of the power sector, especially the distribution end. That's the problem we're facing because in Ghana we have about 9 producing companies. We have only one producer, one distributor. So all the 9 production units would send it to one distributor to distribute. When the lights goes off, it goes off, no announce or nothing. So we don't have a choice to switch to any other company to provide us power or energy during the day or night when the power goes off. So the market is key. The market is everything. Africa can succeed more when we have a lot of these choices in economy. So we can easily have efficiency. Other than that, we will. So corporations, we need more of them. Currently, in some countries, including Ghana again, the cement production, initially we had only one cement production company in Ghana. The cement production, the was very expensive here. You can't buy building. Then fortunately, we had that person from Nigeria and brought in competition. Then we had another one, Diamond was coming from Togo, brought in competition. Currently, we have a lot of cement, we have choices, which ones. So they are competing and they are giving us value. And the prices are also coming down. So free markets, is the way to go. Should we ensure that we have leadership that will understand the principles and implement them? See, the fact is, how to implement the principles within public policy. So most of these leaders in our country, they understand these principles, but they're them with public policy, implementing them and getting value. That has been our challenge. So we should not just talk about the market being the option, being the best for us, but how we can connect that. That is the major issue we have in Africa. But I really do agree with it. Thumbs up.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much, Peter Bismarck, for that. Yeah, of course, we are talking about the promise of free markets in Africa. Yeah, we have a second poll that should be on your screen at the moment, and I want to bring on Majozi in the same context of the statement by Mugabe, and talking about the whole promise of free market systems in Africa. How is Africa likely to look like if we keep on achieving some degree of free markets, internally within countries and internationally across African states and maybe to outside to the outside world.
Well, the end outcome will be prosperity, right? It will be a reduction in poverty rates. It will be a reduction in disease, right? It will be a reduction in, let me say, there will be more independence. There will be more access to resources as more and more of us move to the free market sort of direction. But the fundamental question is, how do we get there? Because I mean, what do we need to do to be able to get to that prosperous society that we are looking for? What are the series of steps that will sort of lead us there? Now, the difficult part is that we live in societies where there is always some sort of political arrangement, right? There is politics involved whenever there has to be a policy sort of being implemented. There has to be a political process to allow for that. And the sad thing is that wherever in this political arrangement that we have in various countries in Africa, the people who usually promote pro-market reforms, we as citizens tend to do not give them that enough support, right? In other words, we tend to vote for people that aren't really sort of pro-market, pro-deregulation, pro-low taxes, pro-consumer choice, and so on. In the case of South Africa, there is overwhelming support for the current ruling party, along with the far left opposition party called the Economic Freedom Fighters, right? So, and these parties are very much aligned to the left, that they like the idea of more government and more government controls, right? So, in other words, to get to that level of this kind of free market Africa that we are looking for, there's sort of a political kind of process we need to go through first, of which in many cases it doesn't go right. It doesn't go the way it should go for us to get there. It's going to be difficult for us to get to a very kind of pro-market environment when in our political activities or in the political process, we align ourselves with the people who are opposed to that idea, right? So it becomes a hard task. So that means then there's much work to be done in terms of making sure that, or at least organizations like African Students for Liberty, African Liberty, the Free Market Foundation in South Africa, guys, Linda in Kenya, Olumayowa in Nigeria, and everybody in the Africa context, in the African region. There is much work for us to do in terms of trying to get people to understand the benefits and the importance of pro-market values and principles, so that when those people sort of move to, when they have an opportunity to vote, they can vote for those parties or for those politicians who can be able, or who are determined to make that a reality, right? And the thing is, this thing, yes, there's government involved, but at the end of the day, at the same time, we need to remember that in most cases, we have an arrangement in Africa, that I should say in many cases, an arrangement where we as citizens have to vote and give power to our officials. And if we give power to officials who want to constrain us and put state controls, then we ourselves are complicit in the whole situation, right? We have failed to make sure that we push for an Africa that is pro-market and an Africa that is open to trade and so on, that defines the free market principles and values. Now, Margaret Wade, which some of you may know, she makes very important points in the sense that she's one of those characters or people who believe, we shouldn't, politicians, let's forget about them and do things ourselves and be innovative and push to change the society ourselves. Yes, let's do that. but there are things that will need along the way that will need to be done by government. And that government didn't elect itself into power. We as citizens elect that government. And if we elect people who are determined to destroy the free market system, to destroy individual liberties, then we ourselves are sort of, complicit in the whole kind of on how Africa becomes at the end.
Thank you for that, Adjozi. Now, politics is it's a great part of how systems work, and mostly here in Africa. Most of the major decision makers, we will find them in government or government institutions, and so on. So I want to bring on Linda to answer two questions. Number one, we've seen the kind of politicians that we have, and over time, most of us, we tend to to have no faith, or rather lose hope immediately after we elect some of these guys into office. And these are some of the people that we might depend on, as we try to move towards a free market. So, Linda, do you think that we have that a political goodwill? Is it ever something that that we can achieve? Do we have people, rather, when you look at the constitution of the sort of guys that we have right now in politics and so on, who are likely to facilitate this? And the second question, I'd like you also to talk about what Africa is likely to look like, even as we move towards achieving more freer markets, and in that context, try to highlight what we must do as individuals, as countries, as a continent. Linda.
Thank you very much. Those are two very interesting questions. And the first is politics, first of all, and whether we have currently the kind of people who can lead Africa to prosperity, whether we, the voters, have goodwill of changing our leadership. We can't see African countries came from first colonial regimes, and then we came into independence, where leadership was transferred now to the African people, and we got African leaders. And if you look at pre-independence, the Africans who had come up during that time were very promising, like, Museveni in Uganda, Mugabe in Zimbabwe, in Kenya, Jomo Kenyatta, Nyerere in Tanzania, and many others. So they had been educated, most of them had been educated abroad. They were the elite in the continent that time, and they were part of that wave across the world of, fighting for what we have now, like Black Lives Matter. And that time they were now fighting against the chains of colonialism to move power back to the people. And they had good intentions, most of them at that time. Now, colonialism really restructured African societies and our systems and the systems of governance, from leadership and governance being in the entire community to being pushed into the center, like to be now where the president, if you're the president, you have, all that autonomy to rule, you have all the power to determine everything, which didn't exist previously. And that was the beginning of, it's like, if you think about it, that's where our problems began, when now power was being shifted into one central place, and the person who was at the helm would later realize the kind of power that they have. And we started seeing greed. Professor George Aite also has written a lot about this. And, people started realizing the kind of power they have, and then greed came up, then massive looting of resources, And from there, it was, a lot of civil wars. Like for us, those of us who have grown up in Kenya, we've been surrounded by countries that have experienced civil war for over 20 years, like South Sudan and Somalia. There were issues in Uganda,
Yeah.
Rwanda, Burundi. So, and, these countries, all they have known for years are dictatorships, including Kenya, many African countries. And
Yeah.
people became very helpless. And some of these rulers were very ruthless. Scores of people were killed. There was no democracy, those dictatorships. There was no, something like free expression was not even given place. And it because of the years of this kind of harsh ruling, they then became part of our societies, and people continued to live with fear that was in their minds. If you speak to our older generations now, they will, even the way they think, they are limited in their thoughts. They're limited in their thoughts, which kind of makes them feel like, they don't actually own their lives. They cannot decide for their lives. So even if they vote or they don't vote, they kind of believe that some things have already been predetermined, and there are people who have a lot of power that are above them, who probably will always be there, and there's nothing they can do, and their voice is not really strong. So you see, as a people, to answer the question of goodwill, we're dealing with, this is the history this is where we've come from. And it's very difficult to
Yeah.
convince
Right.
people that they actually have the power to change their fate and make decisions that will affect them and their future generations, considering that this is the past they've come from, that they have come to actually believe they do not have the power. So then the people who end up getting leadership in our African countries, they have studied our populace and known that most of our people are gullible. Most of our people are gullible. The second thing, after living in communities of years of dictatorship and lack of development, most of our people are poor and living below the dollar. So they respond to basic commodities and basic things. I will build schools for you. I will give you jobs, and I will build roads. So because you as an educated person or a businessman, like these people are gullible. And if I just tell them that I'll give them what they need, they're going to elect me. Now we're having a group of politicians that are selfish individuals who know it's easy for them to get in. All they need is money, and to be, in Kenya, we usually say you need to be politically connected and correct. So if you know the right kinds of people, then you get this access and you're able to lead. Another thing, like something we experience here in Kenya is, again, all you have to do is find yourself to be in the right political party, and you get elected. It doesn't matter whether you're qualified. It doesn't matter whether you're a good person. All you need to do is find yourself in the party that is popular. In South Africa, be in the ANC. In
Yeah.
Kenya, make sure you're in it, depending on where you are. Either you're in ODM or you're in Jubilee Party. In
Yeah.
Uganda, I think you have the favor of great M7, then you're lucky, and if not, sorry. So because this is the system and people have been doing this for years and years, the population, it's like they've lost will. They do not believe that their voice can actually make a difference. And okay, now we have this generation of, like, all of us, I think we are still young people, right? We're
Yeah.
educated and we're knowledgeable, and internet is connecting all of us. Like here we are from all over the continent. We have a voice to decide, but as you guys saw what happened in the United States, this generation actually did not vote. Had they voted, probably they would have prevented Trump from getting into power, but they didn't. They were complaining without making an effort. And it's the same thing in Africa. Maybe it's even worse, that young people do not
Yeah.
vote. Young people do not get into these spaces that will determine the leadership of their country. So the few people who get into politics, because the number is very low, really don't get the support they need as young people. Our culture, first of all, will say, you're too young, it means you're not qualified, you're not ready to lead. Whether you have good policies or not, you will be shunned down. We have a popular politician, he was a political aspirant, and he's an activist called Boniface Mwangi in Kenya. So he has been seen to fight for rights of people practically. He has been severely beaten by police whenever he goes to protest, and he fights for things that we can see. But when he stood to vie for a member of parliament seat, he did not win. He lost with a large margin. The person who was popular from a popular party got the vote instead, who has ended up being not a very wise choice. But you see, this is the society that we come from, unfortunately, where, where is the goodwill? The people who have goodwill, the number is really low. Most people right now, we like to maybe fight online and be heard, but I think we lack courage, probably on a personal level. It's like we just lack the courage to actually do what it takes to make a difference. It starts by voting. It starts by putting yourself into political parties and, start changing the kind of people who are in those parties who are deciding some policies or even nominating the aspirants. It also starts with, maybe if you're educated, or putting yourself in other different leadership levels, not just in politics, but also in government, non-profit organization. If you're in a non-profit organization, being vocal about what you're doing and all that. So I think most of us around African countries, we know where the problem is, we're talking about it, but we are yet to take the steps that are necessary to make a practical difference that will be tangible, that will be seen. It's very possible.
Just a quick one,
yes.
If I don't know if I can comment.
Sure.
Yes, I want to, something Linda mentioned, which was very important. That at times, and in many cases, we see these people who we think, not all the time, but there are people who we think will do a good job when they're in power, right? They get into power, they change and become something else, right? That we're not expecting.
Yeah,
here's a pro-market person we thought was going to fix the economy, get people back to work, reduce poverty, and so on and so on. A person gets there and becomes something else that you never voted for, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And now they're socialists with the objective they've changed to become a socialist with the objective to attract more votes, because to an extent, socialism sounds better. They want to provide things now for people.
Yeah.
Here's what we're going to provide for you. We're going to give you housing. You'll get government grants. You'll get this and that. All these free things they are promising from taxpayers' money. So it's possible that people they change the moment they get into government. And what we need to learn, we need to be mature enough as citizens in the African continent that the moment you change in your first term, we must take our votes so serious that we are going to kick you out if you don't do what you were elected for, right? Because I think that's very important.
Okay, thank you.
Changes, then vote them out.
Yeah, please wind up. Okay, thank you. Yeah. So our session is supposed to, or rather, was supposed to end at 6 p.m. East African time, and yeah, right now is 2 minutes past time. So as we wind up, I'd like now to bring on Peter Bismarck and Mugambi also, as we try to finalize on what the promise for free markets in Africa is. What if we get there, what Africa is going to look like. And I'd like to begin with Peter. Please, if you can still hear me, under 2 minutes, kindly talk to us about that, and then Mugambi will also come in for 2 minutes as we wind up with our today's discussion. Peter. All right, Mugambi, let me bring you on before Peter. Briefly, Mugambi.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to thank all the panelists from respective countries for deliberating on this important topic and at this important time of Africa. Yeah, Africa, first of all, like what Pumulani said, it will be prosperous, but also Africa will have freedom. People will have more freedom, and people will enjoy more of their civil liberties, because if we look at free market, if people are able to be successful and even interact without any kind of force, any kind of prevention or barrier, results have been that these people tend even to welcome more what they call democracy. They tend to vote wisely, they tend to fight for their rights, and they also tend to make good choices. For example, in Uganda, we've been doing some survey and we've been looking at places which have to some extent embraced free market, where it is easy to do business and people are successful. If you look at the quality of the voters or what the voters vote as their candidates, in most cases, they vote policies, they don't vote privileges, they won't vote populism or empty promises, but because they are independent and they can access and they can also defend their rights. So I believe if we attain the economic freedom through free market, Africa would enjoy many things, and Africa will not suffer the dictatorship. And I think also this is a kind of question we need to ask ourselves. What is possible to fight for as libertarians in Africa? Should we start with economic freedom, which I believe economic freedom will be better to start with, because if Africa can create opportunities and we achieve a big middle class, then we may end up even having the freedom following, having term limits following, and having the dictatorship also reducing on African continent. But still the political, some people have been commenting about the political.
Thank you, Mugambi.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, your time is up. Peter, can you hear me? Yeah, we seem to have been having issues with Peter. So, Majosi and Linda, I want to finalize this discussion with you two in maybe 2 minutes each because of time. So here's my friend. We are talking about the whole issue of international trade, imports and exports, and he tells me that some of these countries, like USA, Britain, actually the context was that there's a particular deal that the president of Kenya signed with Prime Minister Boris from the UK, and he's telling me that he doesn't support this whole idea of having a free economy that is open to the outside world. Why? His reasons: number one, because these guys have more to bargain. They're giving us loans and so on, and a lot of products to the outside that are coming into the continent. And at the end of the day, if we are producing, we are having a lot of competition that may not favor local businesses that we have. And I still want to convince this guy about free markets, why we should be opening even our borders to our neighbors and even to the outside world. How do you think I can convince this guy that free markets, open borders, capitalism, which unfortunately he also equates to greed? How do you think I can convince these guys that this is the way to go? Linda, if I can start with you in 2 minutes at most.
Thank you. I think your friend was referring to the free trade agreement between Kenya and the United States, and not with the UK. Yeah. So something that we didn't touch on, and I think which is the future of Africa when it comes to free markets, is African Union's agreement, a plan of creating a common market for Africa that is under the African Continental Free Trade Area. So Africa right now is in the process of creating a common market, which sets to be the largest common market the world has seen in terms of number of members since the creation of the World Trade Organization. And at the moment, if you look at statistics, Africa is not trading with itself, yet we know that most of the world gets its raw materials from Africa, and also some almost finished products, especially agricultural products, they come from Africa. But most of it we ship it outside. From East Africa, you'll find commercial crops like coffee, tea, and
Flowers.
green vegetables and flowers, horticulture. From West Africa, you will find cocoa, which is used to make chocolate, which everyone uses around the world. There is oil, gold, and from Southern Africa also you'll find gold, diamonds. From the Central Africa, you find like some products like uranium that are used to make mobile phones. And Africa is rich, we know that, but we're not currently trading with each other. And our countries have a lot of statist policies. We have a lot of protectionism that doesn't allow the individuals in these countries to trade with each other, which is the key to Africa's prosperity, because some of these things, they are in other countries and not in others. And if we collaborate and if we're able to share with each other, like open the markets for people to trade, while products will come in, income will go to the other. And while income is going, this is like direct investment is moving across the continent. Africa is underdeveloped in infrastructure where traders are not able to transport their goods very well. It's very hectic moving by road. Currently, the Eastern African region is removed from the Western African region because there is no connection through the Central African region. If we had a working infrastructure like what we have in Europe, where you can travel with train across the continent, can only imagine what this means economically for our countries, from tourism to trade to even education and all of that. The products that are in East Africa, because of even the environment and the weather, are not in the West and vice versa, or the South. But because we do not have a link, we are not able to share this. Another thing is our countries lack political will. It's more of political ego from the presidents than the people individually. Mugabe will tell you, there was a time Museveni had issues with Kagame and they closed the border of Uganda and Rwanda. Isn't that right, Mugabe? And I'm sure that are the ones that really suffered. These are individuals that the countries are very close to each other. Both are landlocked, but Uganda is closer to Kenya and Tanzania through the ports. So it means there are a lot of business people who are bringing and shipping goods to Uganda that go all the way to Rwanda. If you close the border, look at how many people you're putting into jeopardy and like closing their jobs and closing their income. So for this, the people who say free markets don't work for Africa, they are afraid because of what they are anticipating the worst. Yet they have not actually given free markets a chance to see it will progress. Our governments in Africa right now are really taxing us so much money compared to the rest of the world. And taxes is one of the main challenges to business making any money in the continent. So if Africa is ready to see prosperity, let our countries reduce the taxes. Let our countries have policies that are less restrictive, that will help reduce the barriers to trade. With less barriers to trade and less taxes, there'll be a more safer and more profitable business environment that will allow African people to trade with each other.
Okay, thank you so much, Linda. Majozi, briefly, if you can still hear me.
Yeah, so, well, there are two ways I think you should approach in trying to convince your friend.
Okay.
I think, do two things, right? The first one is to sort of point the failures of government, right? Where government is failing. In South Africa right now, whenever I go to the media, I always highlight the power cuts that we are facing, which means that it's harming the economy, it's getting people out of jobs. And the reason we're having those power cuts is because there's a monopoly controlled by government when it comes to power or electricity, right? The regulations in South Africa have been rising and rising over the past 26 years of democracy. Unemployment has shot up through the roof, right? Even before COVID-19, which, we saw lockdowns taking place in South Africa from March. So even by end of March this year, the first quarter of this year, South Africa was in a recession, right? So there's a strong case to make there, and many other things where government is failing, right? So people understand the negative impact that is imposed by government on the economy and in people's lives, right? So that's one aspect, that's one element, the government failures, right? Mm-hmm. Then the other one is around the Fraser Institute Index of Economic Freedom, as well as the Heritage Foundation's Index of Economic Freedom. Those two are very important because they show you that the countries that are more pro-market, they have high net, yes, high net income, stability politically, and so on and so on, highly educated and so on. The countries that are ranking at the bottom, in other words, they are not pursuing capitalism or free markets or free enterprise system as much as the others. They are, living in a worse situation, right, in terms of poverty and all other measures. So I think those two for me are quite very important to show people that if you take the free market route, this is what happens, and also highlight the government failures and how government is letting people down. I think if you could pursue that, if you still can't convince your friend, then there's another third option, which is to basically cut the ties, find new friends.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I think I'll try once again to convince him using your approach. So thank you so much, guys. All right. Yeah. So unfortunately, we are out of time. Right now it's 15 minutes past the time we are supposed to end. I know that my boss will be on my case because of that. But I believe that this is really such a huge debate that we should continue having. And if you are to finish it today, actually that would never happen, and we'll be here for several hours and so on. So thank you so much, Linda, Mugambi, Peter, and Mlan for joining us for this session. I hope I'm going to be able to engage you further in our coming sessions, on the topic as you try to pass the ideas of free markets and capitalism across Africa. So yeah, and to our panel, our attendees, thank you so much for joining us. Of course, in case you miss any part of this discussion, it's going to be available on our Facebook page, Liberty Sparks, and we're also going to make sure that we try and get you the link in our monthly emails, so that you can be able, maybe if you want to review something that you didn't quite get or something or anything like that. Also, yeah, feel free to reach out to us within the comments of how our session was. Again, we'll be sending a review after this session. So thank you so much for joining us for this session. My name is Mwoki Musila. I'm in the Marketing and Communications Associate at Liberty Sparks. In East Africa, right now we are in 3 countries, Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda. And we hope that all of you are going to join us as we grow the movement in Africa. And if I might reference our discussion today, try to get the society to be a bit freer and more prosperous. Thank you so much, guys, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.